Welcome back, and thank you for tuning in to HK Cheating Stories. We appreciate each and every one of you joining us. Where in the world are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. Now, let's get the story started. My name is Ethan Walker, and I used to believe in forever. I married my high school sweetheart, worked my hands raw to build a life for us, and gave her everything: my love, my loyalty, my trust. But trust is a dangerous thing when given to the wrong person. One night, I walked into a bar expecting to grab a beer. Instead, I found my wife, wrapped around another man, laughing like I never existed. That was the moment my world shattered. But betrayal was only the beginning, because I had no idea just how deep this nightmare would go. I never thought I'd be the kind of man driving down an empty highway, eyes hollow, hands gripping the wheel like it was the only thing keeping me tethered to this world. But here I was. My chest felt tight, my stomach twisted in knots, and my mind kept replaying the moment my world collapsed. Her name was Sophia Reed, my wife of 5 years. The woman I had built my life around. The woman I had sacrificed everything for. And yet, she had shattered my heart without a second thought. I still remember the way she looked at me that night. Eyes filled with guilt, yet still laced with defiance, as if daring me to question her betrayal. "It's not what you think, Ethan," she had said, her voice barely above a whisper. But I had already heard the truth. I met Sophia in high school. She was the type of girl who turned heads without trying, the kind that made you believe in fairy tales. And like a fool, I believed ours would last forever. Straight out of high school, we got married. I worked my hands raw to provide for us, welding under the scorching sun, taking every job I could. Money was never an issue. I made good money, great money even. Enough to put Sophia through college, to get her a shiny new Toyota, to give her the kind of life most girls from our small town only dreamed of. I thought I was building a future for us. What I didn't see was that I was just building a stepping stone for her to leave me behind. It started small. It always does. At first, it was just girls' night out. Once a week, a harmless little escape with her new friends from the law firm. "I need time to unwind, Ethan," she would say with a smile, kissing me on the cheek before heading out the door. I didn't mind. I trusted her. Then it became twice a week. Then she started staying out later. Then, our Friday date nights, something we had never skipped, were suddenly not a priority anymore. "We can just go out on Saturdays," she said dismissively one night when I confronted her. "I need this time with my friends." Friends. Right. The ones I had never met. The ones who apparently deserved more of her time than her own husband. And just like that, my Friday nights turned into cold dinners alone, staring at my phone, watching the hours tick by, waiting for her to come home. Most nights, she didn't return until 4 a.m. I wasn't stupid. I knew what was happening, but I needed proof. So, I did something I never thought I'd have to do. I installed a tracker on her phone. I hated myself for it. It felt wrong, like I was betraying her. But the reality was, she had already betrayed me first. That Friday, when she told me she was going to dinner with her coworkers, I followed the location on my phone. She wasn't at a restaurant. She was at a bar. A loud, dimly lit place on the other side of town. My hands were shaking as I parked outside. I sat at the kitchen table, fingers drumming against the worn wooden surface, waiting. The house was silent except for the rhythmic ticking of the wall clock. Midnight had passed. She should have been home hours ago. Then, finally, the door creaked open. Sophia stepped inside, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. Her eyes widened when she saw me sitting there, a half-empty beer bottle in front of me. "You're still up?" she asked, her voice cautious. I didn't answer. I just stared. She let out a sigh, rubbing her temples. "Ethan, don't start. I told you I was out with friends." "Friends." I cut her off, my voice low. "That's what we're calling him now." Her jaw tightened. "I don't know what you think you saw, but it's not." "I saw everything, Sophia." I pushed back from the table, standing up slow, controlled. "I saw you sitting next to him. Saw the way you laughed at his jokes. Saw you take off your wedding ring." Her lips parted, but no words came out. I stepped closer, my pulse pounding. "You lied to me." She exhaled sharply. "I didn't lie." "Then tell me the truth." Her hesitation was all the answer I needed. A bitter laugh escaped me. "Right. That's what I thought." I turned away, heading for the bedroom, but her voice stopped me. "I need space, Ethan." I froze. "Space? I've spent my whole life with you," she stammered. "Since high school, it's always been us. Maybe Maybe I need time for myself. I turned back, my eyes narrowing. And him? Is he part of that time? She shook her head, running a hand through her hair. This isn't about another man. It's about me. I scoffed. That's funny, because from where I was standing, it sure as hell looked like it was about him. She looked away. That was the moment I knew. She wouldn't admit it, but I knew. I clenched my jaw. You want space? Fine. But if you walk down this road, Sophia, you might not like where it leads. She didn't answer. She didn't have to. She had already made her choice. The next morning, she acted like nothing had happened. She hummed as she made coffee, scrolling through her phone, pretending we hadn't stood in this very kitchen last night and torn each other apart. I leaned against the counter, watching her. Where are you going tonight? Her fingers froze over her screen. Why? Because I want to know where my wife is on a Friday night. She sighed. Ethan, I told you, I go out with the girls. I need this time to relax. You used to need me, I muttered. She stilled, then turned to face me. I still do. Really? I set my mug down with a thud. Because it sure doesn't feel like it. She pressed her lips together, then walked over, placing a hand on my chest. Ethan, I love you, she whispered. I need to breathe. That doesn't mean I don't love you. I searched her eyes, looking for something, anything, that resembled the woman I married. But all I saw was distance. You said that last week, I murmured. And I meant it. She kissed my cheek, lingering just long enough to make me question my own instincts. Then, just like that, she grabbed her bag and walked out the door. I stood there, jaw clenched, stomach in knots, knowing damn well she was slipping further away. And I had no idea how to stop it. Weeks passed. She still came home late. Still smelled like expensive cologne that wasn't mine. Still dodged my questions with half-hearted excuses. But what bothered me more than anything? Lena Carter, Sophia's friend, her mentor, the woman who had slithered into our marriage like a parasite. She was a partner at the law firm, older than Sophia by at least a decade. Sharp-tongued, ruthless, the kind of woman who chewed up men like me and spit them out without a second thought. And Sophia idolized her. One night, after another silent dinner, Sophia mentioned her name casually. Lena says I need to expand my horizons, she mused, swirling her wine glass. That I've only ever known one life. One man. I gritted my teeth. And what exactly is she suggesting? She shrugged. Just that, maybe I've limited myself. I set my fork down slowly. Limited yourself how, Sophia? She avoided my gaze, sipping her wine. Something inside me snapped. So let me get this straight. I leaned forward, my voice dangerously calm. You go to work, hang around this woman all day, and now you're suddenly questioning our entire marriage. She flinched, but quickly masked it. She just makes good points, Ethan. She's been through this. Yeah, I bet she has. I scoffed. And let me guess. Her husband left her? Her jaw tightened. She left him. Of course she did, I muttered. Sophia sighed, rubbing her temples. You don't get it. You've never been in my position. No, I said, my voice cold. But I know damn well when someone is trying to destroy my marriage. She slammed her glass on the table. God, why are you so damn paranoid? I stood, bracing my hands on the table. Because I'm not an idiot, Sophia. Silence stretched between us, thick with unspoken truths. Then she exhaled, shaking her head. I can't do this right now. She stood, grabbing her phone. And as she walked out of the room, I knew exactly where she was going. I sat back, fists clenched. I had given her every chance to come clean. Now I had no choice but to find out the truth for myself. I should have left. I should have packed my bags, walked out that door, and never looked back. But love, real love, doesn't just die overnight. Even when it's battered, broken, and bleeding, it still clings to hope. And so did I. So when Sophia suddenly changed, when she started acting like the woman I fell in love with again, I let myself believe. That was my first mistake. It started with the little things. She came home early. She cooked dinner. She sat next to me on the couch instead of hiding in the bedroom with her phone. It wasn't much, but after weeks of cold shoulders and empty excuses, it felt like a damn miracle. Then one night, she walked into the kitchen while I was washing dishes and wrapped her arms around me from behind. I miss us, she whispered against my back. I turned off the water and turned to face her. Do you? She nodded, looking up at me with those wide, innocent eyes. The same ones that had made me fall for her years ago. I know I've been distant. I'm sorry, Ethan. I searched her face, trying to find the lie. I wanted to believe her. God, I needed to believe her. And when she leaned up and kissed me, slow and deep, I let myself fall for it. Like a fool. The next day, she called me at work. I want to do something special for us, she said. Just a quiet dinner, just the two of us. I should have known. I should have questioned why. After all these months, she suddenly wanted to be the perfect wife again. But instead, I smiled. That sounds perfect. That night, I walked through the front door to the smell of garlic and melted cheese. Sophia stood in the kitchen, stirring a pot of homemade lasagna, my favorite. Candles flickered on the dining table. A bottle of wine sat chilling in a bucket of ice. Soft jazz played from the speakers. It was like a scene from a different life. A better one. She turned, her smile warm, her dress dangerously short. Do you like it? She asked, biting her lip. I swallowed hard. Yeah, I do. She walked over, pressing a glass of wine into my hand. Drink. Relax. I want a night to be perfect. I took a sip, the rich taste coating my tongue. She ran a hand down my chest. Go freshen up. By the time you're back, dinner will be ready. I kissed her forehead, my heart swelling with something I hadn't felt in months. Hope. By the time I returned to the dining room, the table was set. The lasagna was steaming, the wine poured. Sophia sat across from me, her eyes shining in the candlelight. We ate. We laughed. We talked like we used to. For the first time in months, I felt like maybe, just maybe, we could fix this. Halfway through my second glass of wine, a strange fog settled over me. The room tilted. I blinked, my vision blurring. I tried to lift my fork, but my hand felt heavy. Too heavy. I frowned. Sophia, something's wrong. She reached across the table, brushing her fingers against mine. You're fine, baby. Just relax. No, something was very wrong. My body wasn't listening to me. I tried to push back from the table, but my legs wouldn't move. Panic clawed at my throat. I looked at her, really looked at her. She wasn't nervous. She wasn't scared. She was calm. Like she planned this. The room spun. I tried to speak, but my tongue felt thick, useless. Sophia. Then everything went black. I woke up bound to a chair. My head throbbed. My vision swam. My arms and legs wouldn't budge. They were strapped down tight. Panic surged through me. What the hell was going on? Sophia. My voice came out hoarse, my throat dry. Sophia, what the hell? The bedroom door swung open. She walked in. But she wasn't alone. Lena Carter stepped in behind her, a slow smirk curling her lips. Look who's finally awake, Lena purred. My stomach dropped. I jerked against the restraints, but they wouldn't give. What the hell is this? I snarled. Sophia walked closer, kneeling beside me. She ran a hand down my chest, her touch mockingly soft. I'm sorry, Ethan, she whispered. But you wouldn't understand. My blood ran cold. Understand what? Lena leaned in, her perfume sickly sweet. That your wife is finally ready to. She gestured vaguely, eyes dark with amusement. Broaden her horizons. My stomach churned. Ryan Pierce stepped into the room, followed by another man I didn't recognize. And suddenly, it all clicked. I had been set up. This wasn't about saving our marriage. This was about breaking me. A cruel laugh slipped from Lena's lips as she pulled something from her coat pocket. A phone. She tapped the screen, aimed the camera at me, and hit record. Say cheese, Ethan. And just like that, the nightmare began. The cold bite of the zip ties dug into my wrists, my arms locked against the wooden chair. My legs were bound the same way, the sharp edges slicing into my skin each time I struggled. My head was still foggy, but the reality of my situation was slamming into me like a freight train. I wasn't just restrained. I was trapped. And standing before me, watching my panic with barely hidden amusement, was my wife. Sophia, the woman I had loved since I was a teenager. The woman who had just drugged me, tied me up, and was now staring at me like I was nothing more than an obstacle in her way. I yanked hard against the ties, my muscles straining. Sophia, I growled, my voice hoarse. What the hell is this? She didn't answer. Instead, she just looked at Lena. And Lena? She smiled. Ethan, she purred, stepping closer, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. I told Sophia she needed to expand her horizons. Guess you didn't think that included you, huh? I clenched my jaw. Cut me loose. Lena tilted her head, fake sympathy dripping from her expression. Oh, honey, that's not how this works. Ryan Pierce let out a low chuckle from the doorway, the same smug bastard I'd caught Sophia with at the bar. He stepped inside, rolling up the sleeves of his dress shirt, and leaned against the dresser like he belonged there. I shot Sophia a look, my heart pounding against my ribs. "You let him in here?" She swallowed, shifting uncomfortably, but she didn't answer. That told me everything I needed to know. Ryan smirked. "Come on, Ethan, don't look so shocked. You knew this was coming." "No," I snapped. "I didn't, because I thought my wife wasn't a lying, cheating." A sharp slap cracked across my face. I turned my head back slowly, my cheeks stinging from the force of it. Sophia. Her hand was still raised, her breath shaky. But she didn't look angry. She looked scared. Not of me. Of them. Lena sighed dramatically. "Look, let's cut the tension, shall we?" She waved toward the bed. "Sophia, be a dear and get comfortable." Sophia hesitated. "Lena, maybe we shouldn't." Lena's expression hardened. And suddenly, I understood. This wasn't Sophia's idea. This was Lena's game. But Sophia was playing along. Like a coward. Ryan chuckled and grabbed Sophia by the waist, pulling her against him. "Come on, babe. Don't get cold feet now." I snapped. "Get your hands off her." I roared, jerking against my restraints so hard the chair nearly tipped over. But Ryan just laughed. He laughed like this was funny, like I was some dumb animal fighting against a cage I'd never escape. And Sophia? She closed her eyes and let it happen. That was the moment something inside me broke. Not just anger, not just betrayal, something deeper, something colder. Because I knew, this wasn't just infidelity anymore. This was punishment. A sick, twisted punishment for daring to stand in the way of the life they thought Sophia deserved. My hands clenched into fists, the zip ties cutting deeper into my wrists. I forced myself to breathe through the burning rage clawing up my throat. Then I laughed. Low, quiet. Lena's smug grin faltered. "What's so funny?" she asked. I lifted my head, my vision still swimming, but my focus razor sharp. I locked eyes with Sophia. "You think this makes you free?" I rasped. "You think this means you get away with it?" Her lips parted slightly. She didn't answer. I leaned forward as much as my restraints would allow, my voice deadly calm. "I promise you, Sophia," I whispered, "whatever happens tonight, I will survive it." Lena rolled her eyes. "God, you dramatic types always." The sudden pounding at the front door cut her off. Everyone froze. My heart slammed against my ribcage. The cops? No, they wouldn't have been here that fast. The pounding came again. Then, crack. The door splintered open. A gunshot rang through the house. Lena screamed, diving to the floor. Ryan bolted for the window. And standing in the doorway, a shotgun in her hands, her face hard as stone, was Emma. I stared. She wasn't dressed for a night out. She was in boots, jeans, and a flannel, her hair tied back, her eyes blazing with murderous fury. She swung the shotgun toward Lena. "Get the hell away from him." Lena scrambled backward, her hands raised. Whoa, let's not do anything crazy here." Emma cocked the gun. I had never seen Lena Carter look afraid. Not until that moment. Sophia, shaking, looked between me and Emma. "Emma, please." Emma didn't even glance at her. Her eyes locked onto mine, scanning me from head to toe. The bruises, the restraints, the betrayal. Something dark flashed in her eyes. And then she said the one thing I never expected. "Ethan." Her voice was steady, calm. "Do you want me to shoot her?" The room went silent. And for the first time all night, Sophia looked terrified. The room was frozen in time. Emma stood in the doorway, shotgun leveled at Lena's chest, her finger resting dangerously on the trigger. Ryan was halfway out the window, his body rigid like a trapped animal, eyes darting between me and the door, calculating his chances. Sophia? She looked like she might pass out. Her hands trembled at her sides, her mouth opening and closing like she was trying to form words, but nothing came out. And me? I was still tied to the damn chair, my pulse pounding so loud it drowned out everything else. Emma's voice was calm, almost too calm. "Ethan," she said again, not taking her eyes off Lena. "Say the word." And for the first time that night, I saw real fear flicker across my wife's face. Lena swallowed hard. "Listen." Emma cocked the gun. "Shut up." Ryan made a move, but Emma whipped the barrel toward him in a flash. "You jump," she warned. "And I swear to God, I'll make sure you hit the ground in a body bag." He froze. Everything was teetering on the edge of violence. on the razor-thin line between justice and chaos. And as much as I wanted vengeance, I wanted something more. I wanted to end this. I exhaled, forcing myself to stay level. "Emma," I said, my voice rough, "cut me loose." She hesitated, then took a slow step forward, keeping the shotgun raised. With one swift motion, she pulled a knife from her boot and sliced through the zip ties at my wrists and ankles. Pain flared where the plastic had cut into my skin, but I ignored it. I stood, my legs shaky, and rolled my shoulders. Lena watched me carefully, her hands still raised. I took a slow step toward her. She flinched. "Good. You thought you could break me," I murmured. "You thought I'd just sit here and take it." Her mouth opened, but I didn't give her the chance. I swung. My fist connected with her jaw, sending her stumbling backward. She hit the wall, clutching her face, eyes wide in shock. I turned to Ryan. He scrambled for the window again, but I caught him by the collar and yanked him back. "No, no," I growled. "You're not getting out of this that easy." He swung at me. I dodged. Then I drove my knee straight into his gut. He crumpled to the floor, wheezing. Sophia let out a shaky breath. "Ethan, please." I turned to her, cold and unblinking. "You did this." My voice was low, sharp as a blade. "You let them turn you into this." Tears welled in her eyes. "I never wanted." I shook my head. "Save it." And then I pulled out my phone. I didn't even hesitate. I dialed. The ringing felt like it lasted forever, but then, 911, what's your emergency? I exhaled, my grip tight on the phone. "My name is Ethan Walker," I said, my voice steady. "I need the police. Now." Sophia gasped. "Ethan, no." I shot her a look, and for once, she shut up. I turned back to Emma, who was watching me with an unreadable expression. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded once. "Yeah." She lowered the shotgun, exhaling. "Good. Because I was 2 seconds away from blowing that bastard's kneecaps off." Ryan groaned on the floor. "You psycho." Emma kicked him in the ribs. He shut up real fast. The cops arrived in minutes. The second I heard the sirens, I stepped back and let them do their job. They stormed into the house, weapons drawn, barking orders. Ryan? He was hauled up by his collar, still gasping for breath. Lena? Handcuffed without a fight. And Sophia? She didn't resist, didn't scream, didn't plead. She just let them take her, silent tears streaming down her face. A female officer read her rights as she guided her toward the door. Sophia looked at me one last time, her eyes filled with regret. "Ethan." I just stared at her. Then I turned away. A detective arrived on the scene, a woman named Linda Foster. She was sharp, no nonsense, with a piercing gaze that missed nothing. She listened carefully as I recounted everything, from the tracking app to the setup to the assault. She nodded grimly. "You did the right thing calling us." I clenched my jaw. "So what happens now?" Linda sighed. "We've got plenty to charge them with. Kidnapping, unlawful detainment, assault." She paused, her expression darkening. "But there's something else, Ethan." I frowned. "What?" She lowered her voice. "The law firm your wife works for." She hesitated. "It's been under federal investigation for a while. Money laundering, blackmail, bribery, you name it. And from what you've told me," she exhaled sharply, "your wife wasn't just an innocent bystander in this mess." My blood ran cold. She was involved? Linda's eyes were serious. Deeply. I swallowed hard. My wife, the woman I had loved, had built a life with, had been part of something far worse than I ever imagined. Linda handed me a card. "You're going to want a good lawyer." I took it without a word. She sighed, slipping her notepad into her pocket. "Get some rest, Ethan. You've been through hell." I just nodded, numb. As I watched them shove Sophia into the back of a squad car, I realized something. The woman I had loved was gone, and she had been for a long, long time. This wasn't our life anymore. This wasn't our marriage. It was just the wreckage of a war she had waged against me. And the worst part? She had lost. I thought it was over. After the cops dragged Sophia, Lena, and Ryan away, I stood in my wrecked home, staring at the blood on my knuckles, at the shattered remains of what used to be my life. The house felt like a tomb, empty and cold, filled with ghosts of a love that had died long before I realized it. But I should have known better, because the real nightmare was only just beginning. I barely slept that night. Even with Emma watching over me like a hawk, even with the cops promising they had everything under control, something deep inside me kept whispering that this wasn't finished. And I was right. The next morning, Just as I was pouring my first cup of coffee, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something told me to answer. I pressed the phone to my ear. Silence. Then a low voice, barely a whisper. Dead meat. The call cut off before I could respond. I froze, my grip tightening around the phone. A chill crawled up my spine. That voice, it wasn't Ryan. It wasn't Lena. No, this was someone else. And they wanted me to know they were watching. Emma found me standing in the kitchen, staring at the phone like it might explode in my hands. What's wrong? She asked, her voice sharp, alert. I turned the screen toward her. Got a call. Blocked number. She frowned. What did they say? I swallowed. Just 2 words. She waited. I exhaled. Dead meat. Her expression darkened. She grabbed my phone, checking the call log, then cursed under her breath. They're still out there. I didn't have to ask who they were. This wasn't just about Sophia anymore. This was bigger. The law firm. The people behind it. And now that I had taken their pawn off the board, they were coming for me. 2 hours later, there was a knock at my door. Not the police. Not Emma. Someone else. I grabbed the closest thing I could find, a wrench from my toolbox, and inched toward the door. I peered through the peephole. A woman stood on my porch. Late 20s. Brunette. Sharp eyes darting over her shoulder like she was afraid someone was following her. Something about her seemed familiar. I opened the door, but only a crack. Who the hell are you? I asked. She exhaled sharply. Ethan Walker? I didn't answer. She glanced behind her again, then shoved a manila envelope through the gap in the door. Please, she whispered. Take this. I hesitated. Then I took it. She exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for an hour. Then she turned and bolted down the steps, disappearing around the corner before I could even process what just happened. I looked down at the envelope. My hands felt heavy as I peeled back the flap and slid out the contents. Photographs of a dead man. His body was slumped forward, hands tied behind his back, his face beaten beyond recognition. A second photo showed him from a different angle. A third, a newspaper clipping. Local man found dead. Suicide or something more? The date was from 2 years ago, and at the bottom of the envelope, a note. The letters were cut from magazines and glued onto the paper like something out of a serial killer movie. Back off, or this will be you. A cold, sick feeling settled in my gut. I sat down hard, staring at the images in my hands. This wasn't just a warning. This was proof. Proof that the firm had done this before. And if I wasn't careful, I'd be next. Emma found me 20 minutes later, still sitting at the table, staring at the photographs. She looked at them, then at me. Who sent this? I shook my head. No idea. Some woman dropped it off and ran. Emma picked up the note, reading it slowly. Her jaw clenched. We need to call Linda. I didn't argue. This wasn't something I could handle alone anymore. The assistant DA, Linda Foster, met me in a secure location, a private office away from the station, away from prying eyes. She spread the photographs across the desk, her eyes grim. This is bad, she muttered. No shit, I said. She looked up at me. Do you know who this man is? I shook my head. She let out a slow breath. His name was Brian Carter. The name sent a jolt through my system. Carter, I echoed. Linda nodded. Lena's ex-husband. My stomach dropped. Emma's eyes widened. You think she had him killed? Linda rubbed her temples. If these photos are real, then no. She didn't just have him killed. She tapped the second picture. She made it look like a suicide. I clenched my fists. This wasn't just about cheating anymore. This was murder. Linda sighed, then met my gaze. Ethan, listen to me. This is bigger than just you and Sophia now. The people who run that law firm, they don't just handle divorces and contracts. I swallowed hard. Then what the hell do they do? She hesitated. Then she said the one thing that made my blood run cold. They dispose of problems. Silence. Thick. Heavy. Emma was the first to speak. So what do we do? Linda slid a business card across the desk. First, you hire a damn good lawyer. I took it. And second, she continued, you disappear for a while. I frowned. Disappear? Linda exhaled sharply. Ethan, they're going to come after you. You need to get out of town. Now. I looked at Emma. She nodded. I turned back to Linda. I nodded too. Because for the first time, I wasn't just fighting for revenge. I was fighting to stay alive. I didn't waste time. I packed a bag, grabbed enough cash to last a while, and disappeared. Linda was right. If I stuck around, I wouldn't make it to see the inside of a courtroom. These people weren't just playing legal games anymore. They were covering their tracks, erasing problems. And now, I was problem number one. So I did the only thing that made sense. I ran. I drove through the night. The hum of the road beneath my tires the only thing keeping my mind from spiraling. I had no plan, no clear destination. Just a name in my phone, a voice from the past. David Hunter. An old friend, a man I could trust. He lived out in the country, far enough from everything that I'd be nothing more than a shadow on the map. I called him somewhere between mile marker 120 and the last shreds of my sanity. He answered on the second ring. "Stan, you old bastard. What the hell is going on?" "Long story," I said, gripping the wheel tight. "I need a place to crash for a while. Off the grid." Silence. "Then, you in some kind of trouble?" I hesitated. "Yeah, the bad kind." Another pause. Then a sigh. "Get here. Now." It was almost 3 a.m. by the time I pulled up to David's house. A 2-story log cabin, nestled deep in the woods. The kind of place where nobody asked questions, and the only law that mattered was the one you made for yourself. David met me on the porch, shotgun slung over his shoulder, cigarette dangling from his lips. "Shit, man," he muttered when he got a good look at me. "You look like hell." "Feel worse." He nodded. "Come on in." I stepped inside. The warmth of the place almost too much after the cold weight of the last few weeks. The air smelled like wood smoke and whiskey. It felt safe. For the first time in a long time, I let myself breathe. Then, I heard her voice. "Who the hell is knocking at this hour?" I turned, and there she was. Emma, standing at the top of the stairs, wearing nothing but a long t-shirt and sleep-rumpled hair. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she sighed. "Damn it, Ethan. What the hell did you drag yourself into this time?" The next morning, after a restless night on David's couch, I told them everything. The betrayal, the setup, the law firm, the murder. Emma sat across from me at the kitchen table, arms folded, her expression unreadable. David leaned against the counter, silent, listening. When I finished, David let out a low whistle. "Shit," he muttered. "You weren't kidding. This is bad." Emma, on the other hand, looked furious. "Let me get this straight," she said, voice sharp. "Not only did your wife cheat on you, drug you, and tie you to a chair, but now her bosses want you dead?" I nodded. She exhaled, rubbing her temples. "And you thought coming here was a good idea?" David chuckled. "Relax, sis. He's safer here than anywhere else." Emma shot him a look. "For how long? You think they won't find him?" I frowned. "You got a better idea?" She was quiet for a moment. Then she looked me straight in the eyes and said, "Yeah, we fight back." That night, while David was out gathering supplies, Emma and I sat on the back porch, the stars stretching endless above us. The silence between us wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that only comes from knowing someone for a long time. "You ever gonna tell me why you never left town?" I asked, breaking the quiet. She smirked, taking a sip from her beer. "You ever gonna tell me why you married the wrong woman?" I snorted. "Fair." She glanced at me, her expression softer now. "I never left because I was waiting." "For what?" She gave me a look. I felt my breath hitch. I knew that look. And suddenly, it hit me. Emma had always been there, waiting, and I had been too damn blind to see it. I swallowed hard. "Emma." She shook her head, setting her beer down. "Forget it," she muttered. "It's late." She stood up, but before she could go inside, I reached for her wrist. She stopped. Slowly, she turned back to me. I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something real. Something good. I stood, stepping closer. She didn't move away. Her breathing hitched. I reached up, brushing a strand of hair from her face. And then, before I could second-guess it, before I could let my past keep me chained to a life that didn't exist anymore, I kissed her. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't desperate. It was right. When we finally pulled away, her eyes searched mine. "What does this mean?" she whispered. I exhaled. "It means I'm done waiting." She smiled. And for the first time in forever, so did I. But just as we stood there, caught in a moment that felt untouchable, David's truck came screeching into the driveway. He jumped out, pale as a ghost. "We've got a problem," he said, breathless. Emma and I stiffened. David looked me dead in the eyes. "They know you're here." The air went still. The warmth of the moment was gone. And just like that, the hunt was on. The moment David said those words, the world shifted. The warmth of Emma's touch, the quiet of the night, The fleeting peace I had just begun to feel, it all vanished, replaced by the icy grip of survival mode. I stepped forward, my voice steady. Who knows? David's jaw tightened. Saw a couple of SUVs rolling slow past town. Unfamiliar plates. Didn't stop, didn't ask questions. But I got a bad feeling. Emma muttered a curse under her breath. That's them. I clenched my fists. Then we don't have much time. David nodded. We need to move. Now. We packed fast. Emma grabbed her rifle. David stashed a couple of handguns in the truck. I loaded up whatever cash and supplies I could carry. The plan was simple. Get out before they boxed us in. But we weren't fast enough. Because just as we hit the tree line, headlights cut through the darkness. Engines rumbled. Then, from the other side of the clearing, more headlights. They weren't just watching anymore. They were here. David let out a low whistle. Well, shit. Emma chambered around. Guess we're not running. I exhaled slowly. No, we're not. The SUVs came to a stop. Doors opened. 4 men stepped out. And standing at the front of them, a smug grin stretched across his face, was Ryan Pierce. I had been sure Ryan was still rotting in a jail cell. Clearly, I was wrong. You look surprised, he called out, shoving his hands in his pockets. Thought I was gone, didn't you? I kept my stance firm. Disappointed, actually. His grin widened. Ouch. Behind me, Emma shifted. For guys, she murmured. You think that's all of them? David let out a dry chuckle. Please. These assholes don't come without backup. And as if on cue, movement flickered in the trees. More figures, barely visible in the moonlight, closing in like wolves. I inhaled slowly, calculating. This wasn't just about me anymore. If I didn't end this tonight, it wouldn't stop. They'd never stop. Ryan took another step forward. You've been a real pain in the ass, Ethan. I smiled. Good. His grin flickered. You think this is funny? I tilted my head. Kinda. A muscle in his jaw ticked. Then he pulled a gun. I didn't wait. I moved. Gunfire erupted. Emma took the first shot, dropping one of Ryan's men before he even raised his weapon. David fired next, hitting another square in the chest. Ryan's eyes widened. He hadn't expected us to fight back this hard, this fast. I used his hesitation. I lunged. I tackled him to the ground, his gun flying from his grip. He grunted, twisting beneath me, throwing a wild punch that barely missed my jaw. But I wasn't playing fair. I slammed my fist into his face. Once. Twice. A third time. He struggled, cursing, blood dripping from his nose. Then he pulled a knife. I barely dodged the blade as he swung. It nicked my arm, but I didn't stop. I grabbed his wrist, twisted. Crack. Ryan screamed as the bone snapped. I grabbed the knife from his slackened grip and pressed it to his throat. His breathing was ragged, his eyes wide with something I'd never seen in them before. Fear. I leaned in close. You're done. The trees rustled behind us. I didn't flinch, because it wasn't one of his men. It was the police. Linda arrived with a full SWAT team. Guns drawn. Command shouted. Ryan and his surviving men were dragged away, screaming, cursing. I just stood there, knife still clenched in my hand, breathing like I'd just run for miles. Linda approached me carefully. Ethan. I looked at her. Her gaze flicked to the knife at Ryan's throat. I exhaled and let it drop. Ryan collapsed, groaning in pain. Linda nodded. Good call. The officers secured the scene, cuffing the ones still breathing, marking the ones who weren't. It was over. Really, truly over. The next few weeks were a blur. Ryan and Lena went down hard. Conspiracy, assault, attempted murder. Sophia, too. She thought she'd cut a deal, but the evidence was damning. Life in prison. No parole. And the law firm? Gone. The feds tore through it like vultures, picking it clean, exposing every dirty secret they'd tried to bury. Justice was served. But for me, justice wasn't enough. I needed a new life. And I had one waiting. 1 year later. The shop was small but ours. D&S welding and custom work. David, Nate, and Shipman. Yeah, I kept my last name. Didn't need to hide it anymore. I stood outside, arms crossed, watching as Emma tightened a bolt on a metal frame. She was focused, brows furrowed, strands of blonde hair falling into her face. She caught me staring and smirked. What? I shrugged, just admiring the view. She rolled her eyes, but I caught the way her cheeks flushed. I walked over, pulling her into a slow kiss. She sighed against me, fingers curling into my shirt. This was real. No lies. No betrayals. Just us. When we pulled away, she grinned. You ever think you'd end up here? I thought about it. About everything. Sophia, the law firm, the fights, the running. And then I looked at her. No, I admitted. But I wouldn't change a damn thing. She laughed. And for the first time in a long, long time, I meant it. Looking back, I see now that life has a cruel way of teaching us the lessons we refuse to learn the easy way. I gave my heart to a woman who never deserved it, built a life with someone who only saw me as a stepping stone. And in the end, I nearly lost everything. My freedom, my dignity, even my life. But I survived. And I walked away with wisdom that no book could ever teach. If there's one thing I know now, it's this: trust is sacred. When someone shows you who they truly are, believe them the first time. Don't make excuses for their lies. Don't ignore the red flags waving right in front of you. Love should never feel like a battlefield, and if it does, you're fighting the wrong war. Second, never stop paying attention. We like to believe that loyalty guarantees security, that years spent together means someone will always stand by your side. But people change, or worse, they reveal who they've been all along. Stay sharp. Stay aware. Protect your peace like your life depends on it, because sometimes it does. And finally, new beginnings are always possible. No matter how much time has passed, no matter how deep the wounds run, you can choose happiness. You can rebuild. You can find real love, honest love, even after betrayal. I lost a wife, but I found a life worth living. And that, my friends, is worth everything.